Wednesday series, The Missing Middle, where we are focused on aging with lifelong disabilities and early and middle adulthood. My name is Sonia Durham, and I have the privilege of supporting and helping lead efforts within APSI. And our coalition, for those of you who are not familiar with us, our coalition is committed to bridging the gap between the aging and disability networks. Our goal is really to ensure that individuals with lifelong disabilities can age with dignity, independence, and access to supports that they need across the lifespan. And through this work, we're really focusing on identifying service gaps, increasing awareness, and strengthening cross-sector collaboration and planning for the evolving needs of the individuals as they are aging. If you are interested in getting more information or more involved with APSI, we invite you to drop your email in the chat, and we would love to stay connected and share more of our upcoming opportunities and initiatives. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about us, please drop your email in the chat. As a part of this series, we are really creating space to talk about the missing middle. And we term that because this stage is an often overlooked period of adulthood where individuals are really navigating employment, independence, community living, and long-term planning, often without clear supports or a clear system of support. So tonight, we are really excited to continue the conversation with a focus on planning, advocacy, and building lifelong supports. So it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for week 2, Kathy Mathews. Kathy serves as the CEO of All Needs Planning and the Chief Family Strategist and Advocate at All Needs Planning. She is also a visiting professor at the University of Virginia. And most importantly, she brings the lived experience of being a mother to 2 children with disabilities. Kathy holds a master's degree and a PhD from Columbia University in applied behavioral analysis. She is a Virginia certified special education teacher and a Virginia licensed and board certified behavior analyst. With over 25 years of experience across educational and clinical settings, Kathy has dedicated her career to supporting individuals with disabilities and their families. Her work has included serving as the executive director of the Faison School for Autism and working within the CABAS schooling systems, where she has helped build and develop services focused on addressing gaps and creating lifelong supports. In her current work, Kathy focuses on advocating for services, developing individualized care plans, and walking alongside families as they navigate complex systems and plan for the future. We are honored to have her with us this evening to share her expertise and her perspective. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Mathews.
Thank you, Sonia. I really appreciate being here with you all and just continue to be so impressed with all the work that you do. Um, Thank you, everybody, for being here. Just to kind of get started and go through this. Yes, Sonia, thank you. All those nice things that you said about me, I really appreciate it. What I value the most is that, I do what I am going through for families. My day in and day out on the job is addressing that, it's addressing the same sorts of questions and concerns I have about my own 2 kiddos and what their future is going to look like. So it's this neat thing to have a job where you're doing the work that you need also, alongside amazing individuals and families. Um, so what I'm going to talk about, is, this period of time that Sonia mentioned. But I'm going to try to do it from a framework because I think as a parent, a lot of time, we're worried about the future. We, are going to sleep at night thinking, hey, there's going to be a time when I'm not here one day. What does that look like? What's going to happen? And so one way I see families deal with that is to completely avoid it, and we're not going to talk about it or address it in any capacity. And another way is to try to take hold of it a bit and do some planning and think through those steps. So I want to talk to you tonight about some key steps that you can take and areas to focus on. But the reason why I'm showing you this framework is because there really is a strategy about it. A lot of times when I talk to individuals and families, they're thinking, all right, I know my child has a disability and I need to go get some legal documents to help protect them. or I need to, focus on power of attorney documents, or if I just get an ABLE account, it'll be okay. But as we all know, there's actually a lot of things we need to do. So instead of kind of having that overwhelm of where do I start, it really helps to start in one place and move through at different stages. And so actually, the place that we want to start is here on the care side. Care is really about taking care of our loved one, getting supports and services in place, getting your loved one connected to all the great work that Sonia and her team do, for example. Helping to put together a financial plan, looking at their funding and supports for the future, getting involved in Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicaid waiver programs if those are appropriate. So, care is kind of like a bit about putting out all the things that you're worried about, just really intentionally addressing those. And I'll talk about how to do that. And then once that's done, we actually move to protect that, right? Once we've actually identified what the financial needs are for our loved one, and once we've identified what supports and services they need into adulthood, now we want to wrap that up and think about an estate plan, think about what those decision-making supports need to be. So we actually do that second, even though for a lot of families, that's what they do first. And then we can really, when all of that is secure, look at how to grow and consider new goals and objectives in our lives. So my goal for today is really trying to talk to you about these three big things. So funding is the first one, a care plan being the second one, and then those legal protections. So funding and the care plan have to do with that care portion of planning, that first step. And then legal protections have to do with how we're going to wrap it all up. So I'm going to talk about, sorry, just skipped ahead to make sure. I thought I had that slide there, but I wanted to check. Funding, first of all, starts with understanding our lifetime cost of care. So for everybody, when we think about, oh, how much money do I need to make? How much money do I need to have? What do I need to save? What are the things that I buy? All of that is really a budget, right? That we all live on. We all understand what money comes in and what money is going out. Well, this applies to everyone. So a young adult, someone entering into adulthood, they may still be getting support from their parents, maybe living at home or living in an apartment with some support or not. But there are certainly real costs to that, even if someone else may be paying them. And so we actually want to understand what those are. What does rent or mortgage cost for the person with a disability? What about home maintenance? How much are they spending on food, both at the grocery store and out in the community? We get in a Starbucks every day, or doing a DoorDash on a regular basis. We want to think about, when we go to the doctor, what is that copay? How often are we going? How often do I need to buy a new, iPad or iPhone? What is the cost of that phone service? We really like Netflix. What's that cost? And I know it sounds like a long list, but there are ways to really think through the cost, the expenses, and then also think about the income. What income is coming in for the person with a disability? Has it not started yet? Are we not working yet? Are we not going to be working? Are we on Social Security? What is it? But what's coming in, what's going out? If we can harness this cost of care, this lifetime cost, for an individual with a disability, and figure out what that is on a monthly basis, and then do some math to figure out what that means on an annual basis, we can multiply that. If I have a 22-year-old, I can project that out over their lifetime. Let's say they live, to 100 years old. And then I get a big, giant, scary number that I have to deal with. But that's a really, really good place to start, to actually have that number and understand what that cost is. For a lot of us, all of us in the day to day, we sometimes don't think about that. Like, how much do I need and what am I spending? But often we forget to do that with the individual with a disability, because there are some supports and unpaid hidden supports that people aren't thinking about. So we call this a cost of care. Then we want to think about for parents, what are their costs? And the reason why I bring that up, even though we're here to talk about an individual with a disability, is because if parents or caregivers are providing support, financial or even unpaid care. I have a client that I was talking to. He drives his daughter to work every day. Well, when he's no longer able to do that, who's doing that? Is that Uber? Well, there's a cost to that. We're doing that every day. Oh my goodness. So we really want to think about the individuals, the parents or caregivers in the individual's life so that we can start to think about their cost too. So I have a cost of care for the individual with disability and a cost of care for any parents or caregivers who are playing a role. And so the other reason to bring that up is because sometimes parents, because they're spending those funds on their loved one, they're not thinking about how that's going to eat into their own retirement or other savings because you're just in the day to day sometimes. You're just getting through the day. You're just doing one thing after another, and you're not really, thinking ahead to the future. So as a result of that, sometimes parents might, not know when they can retire. When can I stop working? Do we have enough? What's there? So these numbers really go together. And again, this is why we start with funding because I need to iron all this out so that I can talk to you about, hey, I have an idea of how to address that big, scary lifetime cost of care number that we came up with. We're going to think about we do see a need to maybe get on Social Security benefits or apply for Medicaid to address some of those healthcare costs. That funding analysis gives us the information we need to start to do some planning. So it's really, really important. That's going to help me, again, know what to apply for, what to do, and how to ensure that my loved one's costs are going to be addressed. Another key aspect, because again, I really want to focus this presentation on some takeaways and practical steps, is to really create a care plan. Again, a lot of sometimes as parents, when we're providing support to an individual with disability, we do a lot of things that we just know how to do, right? We've been doing this for a long time. If you're in my house, you know that my kiddo needs to take his medicine first and like give him 30 minutes. And then we're good. And now we can talk about things. There's just things like that that are in my head, and no one else would know that. If you're showing up at my house, standing in my place and taking over for me because I'm not available, I'm in the hospital, or I'm just, unavailable to provide care, you're going to need to know what to do. And there's so many skills that we have as parents. I have families that we support that really provide care that honestly, somebody with medical certifications would provide, but because it's a parent, they're providing it. So we want to document what we call a care plan. We really want to I tell everybody take a day, just mark a day on your calendar, and that's the day. I want you to just dump it out of your head onto a shared document, into a recording, however it is that's comfortable for you, and think about from the time your loved one gets up in the morning to the time they go to bed and any overnight supports and changes on the weekday versus the weekend, and write that all down. It does take a hot minute to get all this information out of your head and put it into a document, but you'll want to do that and then associate that with key important contacts. Like, hey, here's, we have this neighbor and they're awesome. Here's their name and phone number. We have, our primary doctor. This is where they're located. Add those details too, and put that down, and every year commit to going back to that on that special day that you targeted and updating it because things are going to change over the course of the year. But now that you've actually gone through the exercise of, getting it out of your head onto paper, so to speak, it'll be a lot easier to update. Once we do that, we actually want to share that. You'd be surprised, siblings, friends, a lot of times there's sort of this thing that happens where people are kind of waiting. Oh, I don't want to say anything, but I'm sure there's a plan. No, we want to be really, really intentional. We want to say, hey, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, neighbor, friend, really care about you. You know that I have a loved one with a disability. I've taken time to document everything there is about them. This is where it's shared, or hey, can you come over for coffee sometime, or can we meet? And I want you to have this information. Because we also, getting into the next step of legal documents, we want that care plan to be tied to all the legal protections. Now, a letter of intent is a little bit different. You might have heard of that in legal documents. A letter of intent prescribes, your wishes and what you've been doing or want to have, what's important for your person. A care plan is much more detailed. We're talking about really, minute, like brushing teeth, floss, preferences for a shower or bath, like really I wanted you to get all the way down to as much detail as you can. And again, we want to share that with people. I want, if you have a special needs trust or a power of attorney, I want them to know the care plan. And again, if we just look at this once a year, even if it's just, hey, neighbor, I didn't even do any updates this year. We're still doing the same thing. That's great. That's intentional communication that honestly everybody's going to feel better about. I sometimes have families say, oh my goodness, I wouldn't want to share this with anyone. They're going to get overwhelmed. They won't believe what I go to every day to support my loved one. Actually, I feel like they're going to feel a lot better. And if they are overwhelmed, at least you know now and you can revisit where they fit into your planning if they don't feel, up for the job. So I'm going to go into all of this in more detail, but I want to go over here to legal protections. So again, once we have this, we understand the financial, both parents and the individual. We understand the services that they need. Now we want to wrap that up in a legal protection. So estate plan. Estate plan is these are your wills. So, what do you want to happen with your things? Sometimes in a will, people will also say, hey, I intend for, whatever assets to go to my loved one's special needs trust. An estate plan can also include power of attorney, advanced medical directives, family trust or revocable trust, as well as special needs trust. A reason to think about a special needs trust, and I'll go into this in more detail, is because some individuals with disabilities may need public benefits like Medicaid, Medicaid waiver, Social Security benefits, and there are income restrictions and other limitations. So a special needs trust is an entity that can hold assets and resources on behalf of somebody with a disability without impacting their access to, benefits, public benefits and services that they need. So that's why sometimes people mistake a special needs trust for wealth, and it really has nothing to do with wealth. If you think your loved one is ever going to get access by way of an inheritance or something more than $2,000, you actually need a special needs trust. You need to think about that. A microboard, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in a moment. And then the most important thing I can say of all of this, once you've done all these pieces, you really have to practice the plan. And this can feel uncomfortable for some folks. Hey, we're going to have a talk about what happens when I'm no longer here. But again, when I meet those extended family members and the siblings and we do this, they're like, oh, I feel so much better. I actually know what's going to happen. So I want to make sure that we think through how to do that. And I don't know if I should check the chat here because I'm kind of bad about that. Okay, good. Da-da. Okay, I think we're good. I don't see any questions on there. Okay, so services and supports, again, in that care portion, we want to, if you're loved one or if you have a disability and you're thinking, I need some help with daily living skills, I'm having trouble getting involved in my community, or hey, I'm really not able to work enough to cover my expenses. This is where services, these public benefits can come into play, but also other supports and services, again, like the wonderful program at VCU, social skills, community engagement, recreational opportunities. Every community, most communities, I shouldn't say every community, but most communities have opportunities, and also they're a lot online as well. But if your loved one is needing certain supports or services, these are some of the examples that are out there. So a Medicaid waiver, truly every state offers some version of a Medicaid waiver. Every state's going to call it something different, but it is the home and community-based services and supports Every state is authorized to implement that legislation in however, in their own way, I guess. But they're permitted to use Medicaid as the funding source to do so. And that term waiver just means they're waiving the household income. So they're recognizing a very specific group of services for people with disabilities that allows or supports them to live in their homes and communities. This is really combating a historical problem that we had where people with disabilities were often institutionalized. So this HCBS was put into place to say, hey, people with disabilities should be getting services in their homes, their own homes, and their communities. And so Medicaid waiver is one way to do that. So I like to bring this up because sometimes I have folks that say, hey, my loved one is working, they're living on their own, they're driving. I don't think we need a Medicaid waiver. This is something I do think everyone should just consider. It doesn't mean that it's appropriate for everyone, but it is worth taking the time to consider your state's Medicaid waiver program. Residential support, such as living in an apartment, living in your own apartment or your own home, supported living services involve somebody actually coming into your home and helping you there. And it's based on goals. So you could have a goal of, hey, I need to work on activities of daily living, or hey, I need to work on shopping in the community, or I need to work on social engagement. The supported living service does just that. And you really can't get that service any other way. It's not a private health insurance service. There might be some private providers that do it, but folks that avoid the Medicaid waiver, you're also avoiding or preventing access to that particular service. There are a number of other services. Again, every state does them a little bit differently, but it's worth considering for that reason. Medicaid waivers provide, like I said, in-home support, community engagement, day program, residential services like sponsored group home, and the supported living that I described. Social Security is another benefit, and this is related to income, not services. So it's supplemental security income is a program that is for folks that by way of their disability, and there are other stipulations as well in this, but for the sake of this audience, oh, got dark in here. Automatic lights. For the sake of this audience, we'll talk about the disability determination. So for somebody 18 and older, that's where I'm going to focus this conversation. Again, there are lots of programs within Social Security, so this is not the only one. But supplemental security income for someone over the age of 18 is a program whereby if someone is not earning enough, so we're staying under that $2,000 limit, they may, if Social Security agrees by way of their disability determination process that the person has a disability which impacts their ability to work and earn meaningful income to cover their expenses, they can be eligible for supplemental income. And it is truly that. It's meant to supplement whatever income is already there. There are a lot of steps in completing that disability determination, and it can take some time to do it. But again, if you're worried as an individual or as a parent of someone with a disability about their ability to work enough to cover their expenses, this is an important program to consider. It is designed to turn off when you are meeting certain income thresholds and then turn back on when you're not, as long as you're reporting wages. Again, there's a lot of nuance here. We could spend days talking about this program, but another key thing I want to make sure you know is that the time to the disability determination is really looking to make sure the disability occurred in childhood, or, we really want to get this done between the ages of 18 and 22. Sometimes I'll see folks wait until their 30s, 40s, or 50s and then try to apply for supplemental security income. It may work, but because the disability determination process is reviewing records and information from doctors and schooling, again, looking for the onset of disability, the longer you wait, the harder it might be to get your hands on some of those documents due to the passage of time and turnover of people and things like that. So there's sort of this key time between 18 and 22 that we recommend folks go through that application process. SSDI is based on your work history. Sometimes people apply right away for SSDI, not realizing that it's based on work history. So you have to have worked so many years and earned credits in order to get that essentially insurance. It is an insurance program through Social Security that, if I tomorrow have an accident and I can't work anymore, all of the years that I've paid in to Social Security through my work, well, now I get this SSDI benefit because I've worked, paid into the system, and I'm now disabled, not retired, but disabled, can't work. And so this insurance is going to come to me to cover my expenses. The other bit too, the adult child benefit is, or the child, yes, the adult child benefit is when we've applied for Social Security and gone through that disability determination process, when the parents retire, when they draw on their Social Security will ask, "Hey, do you have a disabled adult child?" And we can say yes. And Social Security says, "Oh, yes, Kathy, I see, your son is in our system receiving Social Security." And at that moment, Social Security now views my son's benefit based on my work record, which for many people is going to be higher. The parent's work record is going to result in a higher benefit compared to our child with a disability that doesn't have that work record and is on SSI. So I say that because this is another reason to consider Social Security if it makes sense for you and your loved one is that, when I retire, way in the future and draw my Social Security, if my loved one is on SSI benefit, they could now get an increase in their monthly amount because they'll be drawing on my record based on 50% of my record. And then when I pass away, it goes to 75%. So that's another reason why we, help explain that process. Another thing I just wanted to mention one more time about residential supports and services, because I think sometimes folks don't know what the Medicaid waiver provides. But again, I talked about supported living where you're in your own home and supports are coming in. There's also sponsored residential, which is where somebody with a disability lives with a provider, which means like I could open my home and say, "Hey, I would love for an adult with a disability to live here." My home gets approved, an adult with a disability moves in, and I get paid as their provider to have them there, and that's covered through the Medicaid waiver program. So sometimes that's a great option for somebody that maybe can't live totally on their own, but wants a lot of independence, and living with a sponsor makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, there are group homes and, variations of these services. Really make sure you're paying attention to what you have in your state. So I talked here just as a quick recap of the, care portion. This is where we want to make sure that we're understanding what the care plan says. That not only do we have the details, but what are the cost of some of those? I want people to think about, again, like the gentleman I said that drives his daughter, or if you're doing laundry for somebody, or if you're calling to set up medical appointments. If you don't do that, who does? And what does that person cost? So we want to make sure we've accounted for all of that when we're thinking of how to support our loved one. We talked a little bit about benefits here, and then of course, the financial plan. Once we have that lifetime cost of care and we have parents' retirement plan, we can really start to think about how this is going to work out for both generations, parents and the child. And we want to consider through our planning tax efficient ways. This is where you want to work with a really good CPA that can talk to you about how to make sure if you are leaving assets to a special needs trust, what that should look like and what's the best way to do that. Another thing to consider, the ABLE account, which I'm going to go into in a minute, is a great, savings account for individuals with disabilities. And so we'll talk about that in a second. Employee benefits, that's a thing I see get missed a lot. I'll have parents that are not taking full advantage of their employee benefits. You know, when you get a job and you're just like signing all the forms and trying to get through, sometimes employers provide tremendous benefits, and we always suggest to really maximize those and make sure that you take advantage of all you can there and save yourself some cost and do some great planning. So your financial plan that you're developing for your loved one and for yourself really should address how much does it cost to care for my loved one? How much am I going to need in my own retirement? Do you have any other goals that need funding? Like, did we remember that we might be paying for a wedding as parents, or we might need to buy a car in a few years, or we've always wanted that second home somewhere. And then we want to look through and see where our shortfalls are. Do we, do we have expenses that are much, much greater than the money that's coming in? There are some ways to address that, which I'll talk about. So I did just want to touch on ABLE accounts. So you can have an ABLE account in any state. Some states offer their own ABLE programs. The tax benefit to you is if you use the program in your state that your state has created, usually you can, write some of that off in your state taxes. So again, you just want to understand what's available to you where you are. But the Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, the ABLE, was so important because, again, I just mentioned how if we need Medicaid waiver, if we need Social Security, we're restricted in terms of, what funds our loved one can have. I mean, can you live on, $2,000 a month? That's really very hard. I mean, that alone might be, your rent. So now we've got food, clothes, gas, everything else that we need. It's so very hard. So ABLE was really designed to say, hey, what's going on here? Why are we providing all these great services like Medicaid waiver that a person with a disability may really need, but then asking them to live in poverty? So what are we doing here? So the ABLE account was designed to say, okay, we are going to create a way for people with disabilities to save, so that they can, have access to other resources to cover expenses. So the ABLE account does allow you to, contribute funds on an annual basis, and you can use those funds for qualified disability expenses. So a qualified disability expense is really anything related to your disability. So it could be, hey, I have to use my ABLE funds to cover the cost of a particular therapy, or, I need to use ABLE funds. It's really important for me to go on vacation, but I can't go on vacation by myself. So I'm going to have to hire and pay for someone to come with me to provide some assistance. So I'm going to use those funds to cover that cost of someone coming because I need assistance to do that. So again, if we go back to that care plan, that's where I'm documenting all my loved ones' needs. So if what I'm using the ABLE for, is in line with that care plan, I feel really confident that I am using the ABLE account appropriately. So I wanted to just touch on this quickly. If you are, when we think about the financial side of things and how we're going to also protect all of that and protect our loved one, these are three big areas to consider on the protect side of planning. So insurance is really about addressing funding gaps. So if you are staring at a big scary number and you're like, oh my goodness, my loved one's going to need this, and there's like no way I'm ever going to have that much funding. Life insurance is a tool that's most commonly used to fund a special needs trust. There's all kinds. There's term insurance, there's survivorship, there's whole life. So you want to make sure that you're talking to somebody who's really qualified about that can address your cost of care. And I also want to say, sometimes I'll see families say, oh, I need to get, so many $1 million in life insurance. And I'm like, well, have you checked the cost of care? Is that really the number? So sometimes we just think, oh, we need a lot. But again, there's really a way to get to what your loved one is going to ask and I think need. And I think that can give you some comfort and making sure that you address that. Again, you want to think about work with a CPA. I mean, I will see families spend money on private schools when, or other expenses when is that something that we could have written off or, addressed in our tax planning? So there are CPAs out there that can give folks some guidance on how to do that. And then again, on the legal side, so everybody, all of you here in this meeting should have a will. You should have a will, you should have a power of attorney. Any of us in any moment could become incapacitated, and we need to designate somebody to step in with authority and permission that we've given them to act on our behalf. If I'm suddenly in the hospital and I can't communicate, who's paying my mortgage? Who's taking care of things? That power of attorney is going to designate someone. So make sure you do that. It's not, it's something you can do pretty easily in most situations. So that's an important thing to do. A medical directive is really going to help explain what you want to have happen to you should you become incapacitated, and how you want to handle end of life care. Decision-making support. So, for individuals with disabilities, there's several different ways to think about how to support their decisions. If your loved one has needed a lot of support and they're, under 18 years, you may be thinking about, well, how do I continue that support? Once they are 18, they are an adult and are, making their own decisions. So if they need some support, here's some different avenues. Some states, we have this in Virginia, which is great, have supported decision making, which is where it's a great process where you go through and you identify people in your life that you designate to help you make certain decisions like financial, medical. Hey, I'm having a mental health day. I need some help. So, you can designate somebody through supported decision making to be your helper for that particular topic. There's also the next level up, I would say, is power of attorney, because that is, a legally recognized. Supported living is going to vary state to state how it's recognized, but power of attorney, excuse me, is a standard for designated somebody to make financial and healthcare decisions on your behalf. Guardianship and conservatorship, that is where you were saying someone is incapacitated and unable to make any decisions. So guardianship is more on the day-to-day. Conservatorship are financial decisions. And there are levels within this. So again, you'd want to work with an attorney that knows guardianship. We definitely see people get guardianship who still maintain a lot of their rights. It's really about what's the argument to that court. Guardianship and conservatorship are court processes. So you're really having a judge deem somebody incapacitated, and then an attorney can work with you on how best to preserve some rights. So that is the most restrictive. So just some different ways to think through that. I have microboard on here, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. And I want to talk quickly about special needs trust and a family trust. So again, any trust, get the idea of wealth out of your head for a second. A trust is really about creating an entity. It's a structure. It has its own tax ID number. It just sits over here and you give it the rules to live by. Every state has regulations around this, so you want to make sure that when you're working with an attorney that you're following your state code on how to do that, that all that's embedded in your trust. But essentially, you're saying, hey, here's this entity, and this is what this entity is going to have. It could have a house, it can have property, you can have your retirement account going to it, other assets. A special needs trust is saying, again, hey, there's a person with a disability that is going to need other things than their public benefits, than their Medicaid waiver, or Social Security benefits. So we want to preserve their access to those benefits. So we're going to put any other resources here in this trust, and the trustee is instructed to use those funds and those assets on their behalf. So if the individual with the disability, needs to go to a regular therapy or needs a home, those kinds of things, that's something the trustee could be authorized to do through the trust. I'm gonna do a little spotlight on it real quick. So there are different kinds of trust, and I just wanted to touch on this because it can get confusing. There are lots of different ways to do trust. I'm just going to highlight first party and third party. So, first party is when the person with the disability makes the trust. So, imagine if I have a disability and suddenly grandma leaves me, $100,000 and she wrote that in her will, and now I'm sitting here with $100,000. If I'm needing to access public benefits, that $100,000 is a problem for me. So I need to immediately move that to a trust. And because I'm creating that, because the money came to me, it didn't come to anybody else, it came to me, it's a first party because it's mine. A first party trust, same thing, it can be used for any reason for the benefit of that person with a disability, but it does have a Medicaid payback. So that does mean if there are any funds remaining in that trust, Medicaid can get those funds back because they've basically said, hey, you had all this money, but we know you really wanted to stay on your benefits. So we let that happen, but now you're not here anymore. It looks like there's some funds left. We kind of want our money back, okay? But that's something to be aware of if an accidental inheritance or something happens. A third party special needs trust is what most of us create. So that's what I created for my sons. And so it's not funded, nothing goes in there till I pass away. But it's a way for me to grant or set up this trust on their behalf so I can protect their access to benefits if they need them, and have some resources there on their behalf. I can also write in a remainder beneficiary, which means when my son is no longer here, I could say, hey, I really love this great program at VCU. Please give the remainder funds to that program. So it doesn't have the Medicaid payback. And again, it has to cover supplemental needs. So what that means is if you have this trust because you want access to these public benefits, the trust shouldn't be paying for the same services that those public benefits are providing. So instead, we want to pay for all the supplemental stuff like the iPad, the therapy that's not funded, the social club, all that good stuff. So for a trust, we need to have a trustee. So that's you designating someone or using a professional trustee service. You can have within your trust something like a trust protector, which are people that are, there to monitor how the trustee is implementing things, and then they are authorized to take issue with that if something happens. You can have your microboard and care committee. I really want to make sure you understand in your trust, you're giving it instructions. So you can say, hey, I know Kathy has a disability, but if she's not working or trying to work or improving herself in some way, then I don't think we should be providing supports and services on her behalf. You can set some contingencies in there, or you can say, hey, it's really important that Kathy have a home. So we want to make sure that the trustee has done everything they can to ensure that a home is in place. The trust can also talk about to the trustee, give them instruction on how to handle taxes, who they can take advice from, what professionals they can hire, and it should definitely reference a care plan and a letter of intent. Microboards are my favorite things, but I know I don't have a tremendous amount of time, so I'm going to go fast. But just like any nonprofit organization, a nonprofit organization usually has a board that's overseeing, and advising it. So a board doesn't hire people, fire people necessarily, and run the day to day, but they're providing advice. And that's what a micro board does. And the word micro means for one person. So it's creating a formal circle of support, the neighbors, the friends, the extended family members, the cousin that lives across the country. We can pull those folks together, share with them the care plan, start to get them involved in understanding our loved one with a disability. So fast forward 20 plus years from now, we've created a group of people that's meeting at least once a year that are listening and understanding. I mean, words like Medicaid, Medicare, SSDI, this stuff is like most of the world, isn't running around talking about these things. So we can really start to orient people of this. So this is a great tool. And this is how it works together. So you've got your loved one there. They've got some decision-making support. There's some legal documents in place. And the microboard is just aware of all this. When we run microboard meetings, there's a running agenda. I just had one Monday night, and we were orienting the team. This individual is starting to work, and we were talking about benefits planning and how Social Security works when you're also working. And, they don't know these things, and we're not asking them to do anything. They're just listening right now because they care about this family. But these are their friends and neighbors, truly, like their neighbors that are getting to know their loved one. So a lot of folks will ask, well, do I need an ABLE and a special needs trust? We do think they work great together because the ABLE account does have limits. So you can only contribute $20,000 a year as of now, today, this year, 2026, to an ABLE, but technically it's 19. It's a long story, don't ask. But it's supposed to be 20,000. It hasn't been recognized completely, so right now it's only 19,000. So there's a limit to how much you can put in there every year. But you can spend it all. We really look at the ABLE as like your spending account. Like, this is what I want you to use when you're out and about and you're buying all your stuff, as long as it's related to your disability. I don't want you buying dinner for all your friends. I want you to buy dinner for yourself or buy things for yourself that you need. And it doesn't impact government benefits. But a special needs trust could be directed to keep that ABLE funded, to keep making that annual distribution to the ABLE account. One thing to keep in mind is that if the able can grow and grow and grow, that's what it's intended to do. But if it does go over $100,000, it will impact your access to public benefits. So even though it can grow higher than that, it does have a limit related to benefits. And that may change over the year. ABLE has been adjusted every single year. Here's kind of a side-by-side ABLE Special Needs Trust. For an ABLE, the individual with disability has one account. It's their account, their ABLE in their name. You can throw cash in it. You can deposit paychecks. They could just direct deposit their paycheck to their ABLE. Again, 20,000 a year ish. It's not taxed. There are some states to check where you are. There are some states that have a Medicaid payback in the ABLE, so that if there are any funds left over and the individual passes away, there is a payback there. So just check. Here in Virginia, we don't have that. A special needs trust, you can tie any resources and assets to it. You have unlimited contributions that can be as big or as small as you want it to be, but there are tax consequences. And again, there is not a Medicaid payback if it is a third-party trust. So at the end of the day, again, I started on the money side and the care plan and all that bit, but we really want to end up with a holistic plan that says, hey, I've taken care of supports and services. I've looked into benefits. I understand cost of care. I've solved for that, maybe through, life insurance or an investment strategy, or we found ways to reduce costs by applying for benefits. I've done all this over here. We've got services and supports. The care plan, my loved one is doing well. People are informed of their needs. We've got a nice system. I've got an annual check-in to make sure things are okay. And then you get to a place where I love when parents get to that point and they're just like, they kind of relax, like, okay, we're doing okay. I do want to take some questions, and I realize I've neglected the chat and I'm so sorry, but this is our group. Just if you wanted to know, I did want to also mention, we just wrote a book. It just got published. Sonia, I hope it's okay that I share that, but just so folks know, everything I just talked about is actually in this book. And I wanted to mention we do have a Facebook group. If you're ever thinking like, hey, I just want to get plugged into some people where I can bounce around questions, that is in our All Needs, Special Needs Planning with the All Needs Community Facebook. We also have a learning lab, which is a membership. If you ever like, hey, we've got Eric Omnichek from ABLE did a presentation. We've got attorneys, we've got Social Security experts and folks that have done videos, and they're all in there. And the videos have templates and, it's a great worksheets, things to just help answer, any questions that you have. But I realize again that I have been doing all the talking, so I will stop sharing for a second and go to the chat. here. Um, okay. I see this one from Allison. My understanding is that the Medicaid waiver in Virginia provides support services, but not any money towards the housing. Yeah. Any advice about special needs trust administered in a pooled manner? Oh, perfect. Yes. So this question, I love that you brought up pooled trust because I didn't talk about that. So a pooled trust is here in Virginia, we have Commonwealth Community Trust, Arc of Northern Virginia. There are a few options. You don't have to use a pooled company in your state. You can use their national companies as well. But the a pool trust is where you're really all of the resources are being pulled into that trust company. So the trustee is built into the pooled trust service. They've got a care plan. Their intake process when you're doing a pooled trust is pretty lengthy. And the way that they're going to work is that there's a general understanding of what they need to use the trust funds to pay for to support the person with a disability. But there may also be requests that come up from time to time, like, hey, I really want to buy this e-bike. And then usually a trust company will have a process whereby they're hiring or using a care manager to go out and assess and make sure that that's a legitimate request. And I only say that because for all of these things, there are a lot of concerns about fraud or somebody being taken advantage of. So a lot of companies have built-in protections for that. So I would say the difference is really in what you think. It's an individualized decision whether you're going to do this on your own and make a trust, or you're going to use a pooled company, or you want a professional trustee service. It's such an individualized. I can't say one's better than the other. It's about preference and personal situation. But I'd be happy. I can put my info in the chat if you ever just want to talk through that a little bit. Microboards is okay, sorry. So the micro board is just like any board of directors, but it's just for one person. And it's a circle of support where, at least on an annual basis, a group of people are coming together to talk about the individual with disability. Hopefully, the individual with disability is participating as well. And you're talking through, and like the what it solves is, like, right now, I'm making all the decisions and supports for my kids. I've got to start to build a capacity for somebody else to do that. That's what the microboard is doing. So it's starting to build capacity. And for example, on Monday at that microboard meeting, we have a young man that's starting to work, but he's also getting benefits. And so now we have friends who are going to be attending alongside mom some of these planning meetings for his benefits. So now it's not just mom that knows everything, it's mom and friend. And this isn't a friend that she expects to do everything, but one more person to know the kinds of things we know is important.
Kathy,
Okay.
it looks like there was a question from Elaine. It was, I was told we couldn't get residential daily living support unless we needed it for 40 hours a week. Can you recommend something less intensive?
Yeah, and I don't know. I'd love to know if the case manager said that or if the provider said that, because sometimes providers, residential service providers, have their own minimums that they've just established at their company. Like, hey, I'm not taking on a client unless I can get 40 hours. That's not a state regulation. So I would look at other providers. If it was an issue with a support coordinator, a case manager saying that, support coordinator did say it. And it was, I would love to talk to you one-on-one about that, because that's not what the service is really about. Sometimes too, when I'm working with support coordinators, and they're wonderful. This is a hard job, but sometimes I'll notice that there's like institutional knowledge, like this support coordinator trained that support coordinator, trained that support coordinator, and they're kind of like doing things a certain way. And so there has to be some advocacy or looking further into that, and really, I like to say, hey, please point that regulation out to me. Please show me that policy. Please explain that to me, because sometimes it might be more of a practice than it is a regulation. So I'm very, very happy to, talk to you about that. Um, Anything else you saw that
So there was a question around what is Medicaid payback?
oh yes.
Could you? explain that a little bit more?
Sure. If sometimes, so if you are using Medicaid waiver, if you're using a public benefit like that, and you also have an able or special needs trust, that and the able and special needs trust say there is a payback. Okay, if your state says that, or if it's a first party trust, what that means is that once the person with the disability who that special need trust or able account is in place to support, once they pass away, if there's any money left over in that able account or special needs trust account, that Medicaid could take that back. And if you kind of look at it this way, like on average, residential services cost $5,000 a month. Okay. So if, Medicaid is fully paying that bill because you're on Medicaid waiver, they're paying $5,000 a month, and you've got an able account over here that has $100,000 in it, and you have a Medicaid payback in your state, they might say, hey, you've got $20,000 left in here. Your person passed away. We've been, spending $5,000 a month on you. We're going to take that 20,000 to cover some of the costs that we presented to you because you needed us because we were technically providing more than what you had through our service. And so we have a law regulation to do that. That is not all the time. So make sure you check. I hear some people say, oh, I don't want to trust there's a payback. No, no, no. It's really all about how you set it up.
So there was one more question. What is
Sure.
the best way to plan when there is no one? Any reputable company recommendations that could serve as trustee?
Um, it really depends on where you live. So when you say reputable companies, there's a lot of factors to consider. So property, for example, there's some companies that if you have property in a trust, so if you're leaving your house to a trust, they won't deal with that. It's very individualized. So I don't think here I can just say, oh, go to this company. It's great for trustee services. I'd rather talk to you about your situation and where you are exactly, and I can talk you through that.
Kathy, would you mind sharing your contact information maybe for folks who would be interested in reaching out directly to
Yeah.
tap into your services? And then the last question was around the state rental assistance program. Do you have any insights about the state rental assistance program?
No, no, I don't have anything specifically to offer about that, but I will say in planning, in that first step of planning, we want to consider all the things. So for any available program, because there are tons, again, statewide and then also at the local level, I want to go in and see what's available. What are the eligibility requirements? And if that's something that makes sense and isn't going to tie the individual down, then that is something I want to consider. And we'd also have to look at how that works with any other benefits and services that they're getting. Oops. Okay.
Well, I definitely want to thank you, Kathy, so much for your time. I hope that everyone found this information to be helpful. Kathy did drop her information or her email in the chat. So if you guys wanted to reach out to her for further questions or to maybe tap into some of the services and supports that her company offers, please, please, please reach out. We will have a copy of this recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. And so thank you guys for being a part of our series. And we hope to see you guys next week for our third session.
Great. Thank you,
And
everyone.
the YouTube has been dropped in the chat as well if you guys wanted to take a look.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.